There are some stories that can make your skin crawl, and these 6 ghost ships are guaranteed to haunt your thoughts long after you hear about them. The ocean has always been humanity's greatest mystery, but what happens when entire crews vanish without explanation, leaving behind vessels that drift the seas like phantom warnings from another world? Most people know about the Flying Dutchman, that legendary ship cursed to sail forever. But the real ghost ships we're about to explore have stories that are far more terrifying because they actually happened. These aren't myths or folklore. These are documented cases where experienced sailors, entire families, and seasoned captains simply disappeared, leaving behind only empty vessels and unanswered questions that continue to baffle investigators decades later. The first ship on our list earned its place in maritime horror through one of the most catastrophic wrecks in Pacific history. But what happened after the disaster is what truly defies explanation. Number 6. SS Valencia, the ship that refused to stay dead. Built in 1882, the SS Valencia was originally designed as a passenger steamer, carrying civilians across the Pacific before being repurposed to transport troops during the Spanish-American War. Nothing about this vessel suggested it would become one of the most haunted ships in maritime history. The Valencia was solid, reliable, and had served faithfully for over 2 decades. On January 22, 1906, everything changed. Captain Oscar Johnson was navigating the treacherous waters off Cape Beale near Vancouver Island when thick fog rolled in. This stretch of ocean had already claimed so many vessels that sailors called it the graveyard of the Pacific. But Johnson was experienced. He knew these waters. What happened next would be remembered as one of the worst maritime disasters on the West Coast. The Valencia struck the rocks at full speed, her hull ripping open like paper. Of the 164 souls aboard, only 37 survived. 100 people went down with the ship, including women and children who had been traveling to start new lives. But here's where the story takes a turn that even skeptics struggle to explain. In the months and years following the wreck, rescue teams and local fishermen began reporting something impossible. They found a lifeboat in a nearby cave containing 8 complete skeletons, still seated in rowing positions. The bones showed no signs of trauma beyond what would be expected from exposure, but the positioning was unnaturally perfect, as if the occupants had simply stopped. That was just the beginning. Sailors navigating the area started reporting sightings of lifeboats being rowed by skeletal crews. These weren't fleeting glimpses or tricks of light. Witnesses described watching these ghostly vessels for minutes at a time, their skeletal occupants methodically working the oars in perfect unison. The most chilling reports came from ship captains who swore they saw the Valencia herself, fully intact, with waves lapping at her sides, while human figures clinging desperately to the rigging. This phantom ship would sometimes follow other vessels along the coast for miles before vanishing into fog that seemed to appear from nowhere. Marine investigators documented over 40 separate sightings between 1906 and 1920, many from credible witnesses, including lighthouse keepers and Coast Guard personnel. The sightings always occurred in rough weather, almost as if the Valencia was trying to warn other ships about the dangers lurking in these waters. But our next ghost ship's mystery goes far beyond phantom appearances. This vessel inspired one of literature's most famous mystery stories, and for good reason. What happened aboard defies every logical explanation.
Number 5. Mary Celeste, the perfect mystery. The merchant brigantine Mary Celeste represents the gold standard of maritime mysteries. Built in 1861, she was a solid, seaworthy vessel that had completed numerous successful voyages across the Atlantic. Nothing in her service record suggested she would become the inspiration for countless ghost stories and one of Arthur Conan Doyle's most chilling tales. On November 7, 1872, Captain Benjamin Briggs took command of the Mary Celeste for what should have been a routine cargo run from New York to Genoa, Italy. Briggs was no amateur. He was a seasoned mariner from a family of sea captains. With him sailed 7 experienced crew members, his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia. The cargo was 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, properly secured and documented. The ship was well provisioned with 6 months of food and water. Captain Briggs had made this route before. Everything was routine, professional, exactly as it should be. The last entry in the ship's log was dated November 25, 1872. They had just passed Santa Maria Island in the Azores. The weather was noted as fair, their position was accurately recorded, and nothing seemed amiss. Captain Briggs wrote that they were making good time toward the Strait of Gibraltar. 9 days later, on December 4, 1872, the British brigantine Die Gratia spotted a vessel sailing erratically between Spain and Portugal. Captain David Morehouse recognized the ship immediately. It was the Mary Celeste, and he knew Captain Briggs personally. But something was wrong. The ship was under sail, but moving in an uncontrolled pattern. When Morehouse's crew boarded the Mary Celeste, they found a scene that maritime investigators are still trying to understand today. The ship was completely abandoned, but not damaged. The cargo was intact, the hull was sound, and there was still 6 months of food and fresh water aboard. The crew's personal belongings were undisturbed. Even the captain's valuables were still locked in his cabin. The single lifeboat was missing, but here's what makes no sense. The ship was still perfectly seaworthy. There was some water in the hold, but nothing that couldn't be managed with the pumps. The sails showed wear, but were functional. Most mysteriously, the ship was still on course, sailing toward Gibraltar exactly as planned. Investigation teams found no signs of violence, no blood, no evidence of piracy or struggle. The last entry in the ship's log showed nothing unusual. The navigation equipment was intact and properly maintained. It appeared that 10 people had simply vanished into thin air, but had somehow launched the lifeboat in an orderly fashion before disappearing forever. Theories have ranged from mutiny to waterspouts to toxic fumes from the alcohol cargo, but none explain why the Mary Celeste remained seaworthy, why the cargo was untouched, or why experienced sailors would abandon a perfectly good ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Captain Briggs, his family, and 7 crew members were never seen again. The Mary Celeste was salvaged and returned to service, but her reputation was ruined. Sailors considered her cursed. She changed hands multiple times before finally being deliberately wrecked for insurance money in 1885. Even then, the insurance investigation failed, and the man who destroyed her died in poverty. But if you think a mystery like the Mary Celeste is unprecedented, wait until you hear about a ship that spent decades sailing the Arctic, completely unmanned, appearing and disappearing like a maritime phantom.
Number 4. SS Baychimo, the ship that couldn't die. Some ghost ships haunt the seas for months or maybe years before finally disappearing forever. The SS Baychimo haunted the Arctic Ocean for nearly half a century, becoming one of the most documented phantom vessels in maritime history. Built in 1914 in Sweden, the Baychimo was specifically designed for Arctic trading operations. Her reinforced steel hull could withstand ice pressure that would crush ordinary vessels, and her powerful engines could navigate through partially frozen waters that would trap other ships. The Hudson's Bay Company purchased her in 1921 for fur trading operations along Alaska's northern coast. For 8 years, the Baychimo performed flawlessly, making regular runs between trading posts scattered across the most remote regions of the Arctic. Her crew knew the dangers. This was some of the most treacherous water on Earth, where ice could form in minutes and temperatures could kill an unprotected person in hours. In September 1931, the Baychimo became trapped in pack ice near Barrow, Alaska. This wasn't unusual. Arctic trading vessels often got caught in early freeze-ups and had to wait for spring thaw. The crew set up camp on the ice beside their ship, planning to resume operations when conditions improved. But the ice didn't cooperate. As weeks passed, it became clear that the Baychimo would be locked in solid ice for the entire winter. The Hudson's Bay Company made the decision to abandon the vessel temporarily and retrieve her the following year when she could be freed. On November 24, 1931, a massive blizzard struck the region, with winds exceeding 60 miles per hour. When the storm cleared 3 days later, the crew discovered something impossible. The Baychimo had vanished. The ice where she had been trapped was broken and scattered, but there was no sign of the 1,300-ton vessel. Most assumed she had been crushed by the ice and sunk, but 3 days later, an Inuit hunter reported seeing the Baychimo sailing freely about 45 miles from where she had been abandoned. When a rescue team reached the location, they found the ship intact and seaworthy, but completely deserted. This marked the beginning of the Baychimo's legendary career as a ghost ship. Over the next 30 years, she would be spotted dozens of times by pilots, other ships, and coastal observers, always sailing alone through waters that would challenge experienced crews. In 1933, she was found frozen in ice again near Alaska. A group of explorers boarded her and discovered that while she was weathered from 2 years in the Arctic, she was still structurally sound. They actually lived aboard the Baychimo for several days before the ice shifted and she disappeared once again. The pattern continued for decades. The Baychimo would appear sailing through ice fields that should have been impossible to navigate, always unmanned, always just beyond reach of anyone trying to salvage her. She was spotted in 1934, 1935, 1939, 1941, and 1943, each time in different locations across hundreds of miles of Arctic Ocean. During World War II, she was reportedly seen by military aircraft flying reconnaissance missions over the Arctic. Pilots described watching the Baychimo sail through ice formations that would require expert navigation, her course changes suggesting some kind of intelligent control, even though no one was aboard. The most credible sighting came in 1962, when she was spotted near the Beaufort Sea by a group of Inuit fishermen who knew the ship's reputation. They approached close enough to read her name on the hull before rough weather forced them to retreat. That was the last confirmed sighting of the Baychimo under sail. In 1969, she was found one final time, trapped in ice near the Arctic coast of Alaska. By then, she had been sailing unmanned for 38 years, somehow navigating thousands of miles of the world's most dangerous waters without a crew. She has not been seen since, and most experts believe she finally succumbed to the Arctic Ocean sometime in the 1970s. The Baychimo's story challenges everything we know about navigation and seamanship. How does a ship sail for decades through ice fields that require expert piloting? How does she avoid the crushing ice that destroys purpose-built icebreakers? The questions remain unanswered. But our next ghost ship's mystery involves something even more disturbing, a crew who may have killed each other over a dark secret.
Number 3. Carroll A. Deering, Murder on the High Seas. The 5-masted schooner Carroll A. Deering was launched on April 4, 1919, during the golden age of American sailing ships. At 255 feet long, she was one of the largest and most advanced schooners ever built, designed to carry massive cargo loads across the Atlantic with unprecedented efficiency. Her first captain was William H. Merritt, a decorated World War I hero whose reputation for seamanship was legendary among merchant mariners. When the Deering set sail from Norfolk, Virginia on July 19, 2020, carrying a cargo of coal bound for Rio de Janeiro, everything seemed routine for what should have been a profitable trading voyage. The trouble started almost immediately, but not from the sea. Captain Merritt fell seriously ill during the Atlantic crossing, and by the time they reached Brazilian waters, he was too sick to continue commanding the vessel. The ship's owners arranged for a replacement captain to meet them in Barbados. Enter Captain Willis B. Wormel, an experienced mariner in his own right, but a man who had never sailed with this particular crew. With him came First Mate Charles B. McClellan, and this is where the story takes a dark turn that would end in one of maritime history's most disturbing mysteries. The coal delivery to Brazil went smoothly, but as the Deering made her way through various Caribbean ports, disturbing reports began to surface. Harbor officials and fellow sailors reported that McClellan was a violent drunk who openly mistreated the crew and made increasingly hostile statements about Captain Wormel. In Barbados, a crew member from another ship overheard McClellan making a chilling threat. "I'll get the captain before we get to Norfolk. I will." The sailor was so disturbed by McClellan's demeanor that he reported the conversation to local authorities, but the Deering had already departed for home. On January 28, 1921, the Carroll A. Deering made contact with the Cape Lookout lightship off the North Carolina coast. A crew member shouted that they had lost their anchors and were heading for Norfolk. The lighthouse keeper noted that the man appeared agitated and that something seemed wrong with the ship's usual protocol for such communications. 3 days later, on January 31, 1921, the Carroll A. Deering was discovered run aground on the Diamond Shoals, one of the most treacherous areas off Cape Hatteras. The ship was intact, but completely abandoned. All lifeboats were missing, along with the ship's logbooks, navigation equipment, and personal effects of the crew. When investigators boarded the vessel, they found a scene that suggested hasty abandonment. The ship's maps were scattered, charts were missing, and the crew's quarters showed signs of hurried packing. Most significantly, the ship's firearms were gone, and the radio equipment had been destroyed. The investigation that followed became one of the largest maritime mysteries in U.S. Coast Guard history. 5 government agencies participated, including the FBI, but no trace of Captain Wormel, First Mate McClellan, or the other 9 crew members was ever found. Evidence suggested that the conflict between Wormel and McClellan had escalated into something deadly. Several theories emerged. McClellan had murdered the captain and taken control of the ship, leading to mutiny. The crew had killed both officers and fled, or pirates had attacked the vessel and kidnapped or killed everyone aboard. The most disturbing theory came from investigators who believed that McClellan indeed killed Captain Wormel, but that the crew then turned on McClellan in revenge. This would explain why all the ship's weapons were missing and why the abandonment appeared so chaotic. What makes the Carroll A. Deering case particularly chilling is that 11 experienced sailors simply vanished without leaving any trace in the ocean or on land. Despite extensive searches and investigations that continued for years, not a single body, piece of wreckage from the lifeboats, or personal item belonging to the crew was ever recovered. The case was officially closed in 1922 with no conclusions, making it one of the few maritime disasters where the fate of everyone involved remains completely unknown. The Carroll A. Deering herself was eventually broken up for scrap, but the mystery of what happened during those final days continues to haunt maritime historians. But if you think the Carroll A. Deering story is disturbing, our next ghost ship involves a disappearance so complete that some investigators believe it could only be explained by forces beyond normal human experience.
Number 2. MV Joyita, the ship that disappeared twice.
The MV Joyita started her career as a luxury yacht before World War II transformed her into something far more practical and deadly. Built in 1931 for wealthy Americans who wanted to cruise the Pacific in style, she was requisitioned by the U.S. Navy in 1941 and converted into a patrol vessel for anti-submarine warfare. After the war, the Joyita was sold to private interests and became a trading and fishing charter serving the remote islands of the South Pacific. By 1955, she was operated by Captain Thomas H. Dusty Miller, an experienced mariner who knew the dangerous waters around Samoa and the scattered island chains where navigation errors could mean death. On October 3, 1955, the Joyita departed from Apia Harbor in Samoa, carrying 25 souls, 16 crew members, and 9 passengers, including government officials and families traveling to the remote Tokelau Islands. The voyage was routine, just 270 miles across familiar waters that Captain Miller had navigated many times before. The Joyita was well equipped for Pacific trading operations. She carried extensive cargo, including timber, food supplies, and medical equipment destined for the isolated island communities. The passenger list included Commissioner H.E. Peerless, traveling on official government business, and several families with children who were making what should have been a simple 2-day journey. Captain Miller filed his departure plan with harbor authorities, indicating an expected arrival time of October 5, 1955. The weather forecast was favorable, and the Joyita's radio was functioning properly. Everything was routine for what the shipping company considered a routine milk run between established ports. But the Joyita never arrived at her destination. When she failed to make contact on October 6th, search operations began immediately. The Royal New Zealand Air Force launched extensive aerial searches covering thousands of square miles of ocean, while ships from multiple nations scoured the shipping lanes between Samoa and Tokelau. For 5 weeks, there was no trace of the vessel or any of the 25 people aboard. The search area expanded to cover over 100,000 square miles of Pacific Ocean, making it one of the largest maritime search operations in South Pacific history. On November 10, 1955, a merchant vessel spotted something impossible. The Joyita, partially submerged but still afloat, drifting 600 miles northwest of her planned route. When salvage crews reached the vessel, they found a scene that defied explanation. The ship was listing heavily to starboard, with her cargo holds flooded, but she was structurally intact. There was no evidence of collision, explosion, or major mechanical failure. The hull showed no signs of damage that would explain why she was taking on water. Most mysteriously, there was no sign of the 25 people who had been aboard. All of the ship's lifeboats were missing, which initially suggested an orderly abandonment, but the evidence told a more disturbing story. The ship's radio had been tuned to the international distress frequency, indicating that someone had attempted to send an SOS, but no distress signal had ever been received by any station. Investigators found a doctor's medical bag open on the deck, with bloody bandages scattered around it, suggesting that someone had been injured and treated aboard the ship. Several firearms that should have been locked in the captain's cabin were missing, along with the ship's logbooks and navigation equipment. Most puzzlingly was the cargo hold. 4 tons of cargo were unaccounted for, but not in any pattern that suggested theft or pirates. Some valuable items remained, while less expensive goods were missing, as if the selection had been random or hurried. The condition of the Joyita herself raised more questions than answers. Naval architects who examined the wreck determined that even with the flooding, the ship should have remained stable enough for weeks or even months. Her cork insulation and sealed compartments meant she was virtually unsinkable, so why had the crew and passengers abandoned what was essentially a safe refuge?
Investigation teams proposed dozens of theories. Some suggested piracy, though the random cargo selection didn't support this. Others theorized about mutiny, mechanical failure, or even attack by hostile forces. More exotic explanations included kidnapping by Soviet submarines or encounter with unidentified military vessels. The most likely scenario developed by investigators was that the Joyita had begun taking on water through a hull breach too small to detect in the wreck examination. As the ship listed and appeared to be sinking, Captain Miller had ordered everyone into the lifeboats, expecting rescue within days. But no trace of the lifeboats, debris, or any of the 25 people was ever found, despite extensive searches. In the vast Pacific Ocean, 5 lifeboats carrying 25 people had simply vanished as if they had never existed. The Joyita case remains officially unsolved, representing one of the Pacific's greatest maritime mysteries. 25 people disappeared so completely that not even a life jacket or piece of wreckage from their lifeboats was ever recovered. But our final ghost ship story is different from all the others, because this vessel was found with something even more disturbing than missing crews. It was discovered with evidence of the impossible.
Number 1. HMS Resolute, the ship that sailed from the dead. HMS Resolute began her career as a civilian merchant vessel before the British Royal Navy purchased her in 1850 for a mission that would push the boundaries of human endurance and ultimately create one of maritime history's most inexplicable ghost ship stories. The ship was retrofitted for Arctic exploration as part of the massive search for Sir John Franklin's lost expedition, which had vanished while seeking the Northwest Passage through the Canadian Arctic. Franklin and his 129 men had disappeared without trace, prompting the largest rescue operation in maritime history. Under the command of Captain Horatio Thomas Austin, HMS Resolute served as flagship of the rescue fleet, spending the brutal Arctic winter of 1850 to 1851 searching for any sign of Franklin's ships. The crew endured temperatures that reached 60 degrees below zero, constant darkness for months, and ice pressure that could crush a ship's hull like an eggshell. The mission achieved partial success when Resolute's crew discovered Franklin's winter camp on Beechey Island, including graves of 3 expedition members and evidence of their desperate final months. But Franklin himself and the majority of his men remained missing, and the Resolute returned to England with more questions than answers. In 1852, HMS Resolute was reassigned to Captain Sir Edward Belcher for another Franklin search mission. This expedition would become one of the Royal Navy's greatest disasters, though what happened to the Resolute herself defies every law of physics and navigation. On May 15, 1854, Captain Belcher made the most difficult decision of his naval career. HMS Resolute had become trapped in pack ice in Viscount Melville Sound, one of the most remote and dangerous areas of the Canadian Arctic. With winter approaching and the ice showing no signs of breaking up, Belcher ordered the crew to abandon ship. The abandonment was conducted with typical Royal Navy precision. The crew removed essential supplies and equipment, secured the ship as well as possible, and established camp on the ice. They expected the Resolute to be crushed by ice pressure within weeks, as had happened to countless Arctic vessels before her. Captain Belcher and his crew were eventually rescued by other ships and returned to England, where Belcher faced court-martial for abandoning HMS Resolute. The Admiralty considered the ship a total loss, worth over £100,000, a massive sum that represented years of naval budget. But on September 10, 1855, more than a year after her abandonment, American whaler Captain James Buddington made a discovery that shocked the maritime world. He found HMS Resolute sailing freely in Baffin Bay, over 1,200 miles from where she had been abandoned, completely intact and seaworthy. When Buddington boarded the vessel, he found a scene preserved as if time had stopped. The captain's cabin was exactly as Captain Belcher had left it, teapot still on the table, Bible open to a marked page, glasses still containing liquor that had somehow not frozen solid. Personal belongings remained in their proper places, and the ship's chronometer was still running accurately. Most impossibly, HMS Resolute had not only freed herself from the ice that had trapped her for over a year, but had somehow navigated over 1,200 miles of the world's most dangerous waters completely unmanned. The route she had traveled included passages through moving ice fields that require expert navigation to survive. Weather records from the period showed that ice conditions during the Resolute's ghostly voyage had been particularly severe, with shifting pack ice and sudden storms that had claimed several other vessels. The idea that an unmanned ship could navigate these hazards seemed physically impossible. American officials purchased HMS Resolute from Captain Buddington and spent considerable resources restoring her as a gesture of friendship to Great Britain. The ship was returned to Queen Victoria in 1856, but her reputation as a ghost ship had spread throughout the maritime world. The Resolute was eventually broken up in 1879, and her timbers were used to construct a desk that was presented to the President of the United States. That desk still sits in the Oval Office today, a reminder of one of history's most inexplicable maritime mysteries. No one has ever provided a satisfactory explanation for how HMS Resolute freed herself from the ice, navigated over 1,200 miles of treacherous Arctic waters without a crew, and arrived in perfect condition more than a year after being abandoned. The case remains one of the few documented instances of a ship apparently sailing itself across impossible distances through some of the world's most dangerous waters.
These 6 ghost ships represent more than just maritime mysteries. They're evidence that the ocean still holds secrets that challenge our understanding of what's possible. From the phantom appearances of the SS Valencia to the impossible voyage of HMS Resolute, each case involves documented events that expert investigators have been unable to explain. What connects all these stories is not just the disappearance of crews or the mysterious behavior of the ships themselves, but the way they challenge our assumptions about the natural world. How does a ship sail itself across 1,200 miles of Arctic ice? Why do experienced sailors abandon perfectly seaworthy vessels? What forces could make an entire crew vanish so completely that no trace is ever found? The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet's surface, yet we've explored less than 5% of it. In those vast, unexplored depths, currents we don't understand move according to patterns we've never mapped, and forces we can't measure affect everything that sails above them. These ghost ships remind us that for all our modern technology and scientific knowledge, the sea remains humanity's greatest frontier. Somewhere out there, in waters too deep to fathom and currents too complex to predict, the answers to these mysteries are waiting. Until we find them, these phantom vessels will continue to haunt our imaginations, sailing through the darkness between what we know and what we fear might be true. The next time you look out at the ocean, remember that beneath those waves lie the secrets of the Mary Celeste, the final resting place of the Baychimo, and perhaps the ghostly presence of ships still sailing waters they should never have been able to navigate alone.